The world's fastest growing displacement crisis is taking place in Sudan after a brutal civil war broke out in Sudan. Around 12 million people have been at the brink of displacement since April 2023. Let us try to address the core questions of what is happening in Sudan, who the major players are, what are the root causes, why is there a famine, and what is the reason for global neglect. To understand the present conflict, it is essential to understand Sudan's history since gaining its independence in 1956. This African nation has endured a chronic state of instability, marked by a history of 20 coup attempts, prolonged periods of military rule, and two devastating civil wars that spanned from 1955 to 2005. The first civil war erupted even before the country gained its full independence, when the southern regions felt marginalized and rebelled against the central government. The Second Civil War, however, began in 1983 after the government annulled the South's autonomy and imposed Islamic law, giving rise to Sudan's People's Liberation Army. These earlier conflicts were fueled by deep-seated ethnic and religious divisions, particularly between the Arab-Muslim-dominated government in Khartoum and predominantly Christian and animist population in the southern regions, as well as by disputes over resource allocations and political marginalization. The Second Civil War ultimately led to the cessation of South Sudan in 2011, but internal conflicts such as one in the western Darfur region persisted. This pattern of chronic instability and government's long-standing use of state-sponsored militias to enforce its will laid the groundwork for the current war. The root of the present civil war can be traced directly to the rise of two competing military forces and their fragile alliance. The Rapid Support Force (RSF), a paramilitary group that has become one of Sudan's most destabilizing entities, originated from Janjaweed militias. The Janjaweed history dates back to the mid-1980s when the Sudanese government armed nomadic groups to serve as a counter-insurgency proxy force. These militias were used by former President Omar al-Bashir's government in early 2000s to combat rebellion in the Darfur region. And in 2013, al-Bashir officially formalized these militias into the RSF, Rapid Support Forces, and granted them a legal albeit autonomous status. He appointed Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, known as Hemeti, as its commander. This new force operated independently of the traditional Sudanese Armed Forces (SAF) and reported directly to the president. This arrangement consolidated RSF's independent status and their influence within the country's power structure. Remember this picture of young girls chanting songs of As-Sawra? This is the year 2019. The people of Sudan took to the streets against political repression, authoritarianism, and the corruption of the government. The 30-year-long rule of President Omar al-Bashir was ousted by a military coup, and Sudan went into a state of emergency. But all was not achieved. A power-sharing arrangement was established between the SAF, led by General Abdul Fattah al-Burhan, and the RSF. A year after this agreement in 2011, the two factions cooperated in a military coup that overthrew the transitional civilian government. Over the next 2 years, tension grew between al-Burhan and Hemeti over the proposed integration of Rapid Support Forces into the Sudanese Armed Forces. The RSF had already grown into a formidable and autonomous entity with enough political and military influence. Integration would mean no share in power or civilian control. The fight was not just for political dominance, but also for control over Sudan's economic engine and strategic infrastructure. During President al-Bashir's regime, the RSF's leader, Hemeti, had grown immensely wealthy from controlling gold mines in Darfur in Jabal Amir, which provided a substantial source of funding for his paramilitaries. All this eventually led to a full-scale armed conflict on April 15, 2023. The RSF's forces quickly raided the international airport and the presidential palace, and brutal ground battles ensued between SAF and the RSF in the city of Khartoum. By late 2023, RSF had controlled most of Darfur and advanced in other key regions. In early 2024, the SAF regained its momentum and was advancing in Omdurman. They eventually retook the Khartoum area, including the presidential palace and airport, by March 2025. But a full-scale victory of military remains unlikely given the fragmentation of armed groups and the decentralized nature of this conflict. By June 2024, around 150,000 lives were lost in the conflict, but the overall death toll from violence, starvation, and disease is considered even higher. A recent report commissioned by London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine estimated over 67,000 deaths in the state of Khartoum alone between 2023 and 2024. As of July 2025, 7.7 million people are internally displaced persons, out of which over 5 million are children, and an additional 4.1 million have fled the country as refugees, primarily in neighboring countries like Egypt and Chad. There is significant external support to both the parties that have only fueled this violence. For Sudanese Armed Forces, support has come from countries including Iran, Russia, Egypt, and Turkey. Iran and Russia, for example, have provided military supplies and technology, including drones, in an effort to establish a naval presence in Port Sudan to gain influence over the Red Sea. Egypt, which shares historical ties with Sudan, has also provided extensive support, including Turkish-made drones and intelligence capabilities. The Rapid Support Forces, on the other hand, has a key international backer in the United Arab Emirates, UAE. Although UAE government has officially denied any collaboration, the evidence suggests that UAE has supplied the RSF with drones, weapons, and medical support via logistic routes through Chad and South Sudan. These allegations are further supported by Sudanese government accusation that UAE has funded Colombian mercenaries to fight alongside the RSF. The UAE's interest in Sudan are reportedly linked to long-standing military ties and access to country's gold mines, a crucial source for revenue for the RSF. Many political analysts have described the UAE as the main culprit and stated that both the RSF and the SAF, Sudanese government, are exporting gold to UAE to finance their war efforts. The UAE has also been accused of facilitating Hemeti's diplomatic visit to African nations such as Ethiopia, Kenya, Uganda, and where he was treated as a statesman. There is also Russian intervention in the conflict. Russian private military outfit Wagner Group has a long-standing relationship with the RSF, primarily centered on gold smuggling to fund its operation elsewhere. A UN fact-finding mission in September 2024 concluded that both sides, SAF and RSF, have engaged in indiscriminate attack on civilians, arbitrary arrests, rape, torture, and extrajudicial executions. The RSF has been accused of committing genocide against non-Arab ethnic groups in Darfur and have led campaigns to eliminate ethnic Masalit communities in El Janina. The SAF has also been accused of deploying chemical weapons and carrying out airstrikes in western Darfur that have resulted in hundreds of civilian casualties. Today, Sudan is suffering through a widespread famine. It is a direct consequence of the ongoing conflict. The warring parties have systematically attacked the country's food production, aid distribution, and healthcare system. The Jazeera state, which once produced half of Sudan's wheat, was particularly affected by RSF pillaging and crop burning. Similarly, the SAF has struck markets with air-delivered explosive, turning critical food sources into sites of violence. In besieged areas, residents are surviving on animal fodder and food waste. The SAF has prevented aid from reaching RSF-controlled areas, while the RSF has besieged key cities like Al-Fashar, cutting off hundreds of thousands of people from life-saving assistance. Together, they have created a crisis that threatens the lives of millions. The conflict has also led to wholesale collapse of Sudan's health and water infrastructure. More than 80% of hospitals in conflict zones are non-operational. The healthcare system is on the brink of collapse, with at least 119 verified attacks on healthcare facilities since April 2023. RSF have attacked a key emergency hospital in Al-Fashar. Around 3.4 million children under the age of 5 are at the high risk of epidemic diseases. In such a dire state of healthcare, a major cholera outbreak has been ravaging the country since August 2024, and since then, over 65,200 cases have been reported. More than 1,700 deaths have been reported across 12 out of 18 states in Sudan. Attacks on power plants in Khartoum has also disrupted electricity, which in turn has caused water shortage and forced families to rely on unsafe, contaminated sources, increasing the risk of waterborne diseases. Despite its catastrophic scale, the situation in Sudan has been largely overshadowed by conflicts and political tensions elsewhere around the globe. The conflict's longevity and intensity are not solely an internal matter. They are significantly fueled by external interference from various countries, all for Sudan's gold and resources. the world's largest displacement crisis has sadly become one of its most neglected crises.